In a fight that was originally booked for UFC 278, a couple of flyweights that were ready to square off in Salt Lake City, Utah, we have Miranda Maverick taking on Shanna Young. Unfortunately, Young was hospitalized on the Friday of weigh-ins due to what we assume was weight cut issue. But for Young, she gets the opportunity to take on Maverick. Coming up this weekend, we're going to throw it back to the original prediction that we had done for UFC 278. The particulars of the fight game have not changed. We'll update you with the odds and we'll make a final pick and prediction on the fight. We have Fear Thee, Miranda Maverick taking on the Shanimal, changed the nickname. Shanna Young, who switched up camps here recently, found success in her last fight with that switch up. A finish win over Gina Mazzani. Back mounted, hammering away, TKO. Big win for the Shanimal. Her first win in a meaningful amount of time because before that, a win over Maiju Suotama back 2 years and 9 months ago. And for Shanna Young, it's been an odd run. I mean, she lose to Sarah Alpar in Dana White's Contender Series, lose to Macy Chasson in a short notice debut, lose to Stephanie Egger. And in all of those fights, it was the threat of the takedown that was really her downfall. And if you do look at it in the original fight between Shanna Young and Miranda Maverick, they didn't have any time to train for each other. It was the luck of the draw in the tournament. Maverick goes out there with her southpaw stance, tries to throw some strikes. Shanna Young stood a little bit taller than she normally does. She usually keeps a low base against wrestlers. She was starting to work her strikes. Maverick went for one, and then she was kind of on her tippy toes. Shanna Young pushed her with a jab, kind of stumbles her backwards. Maverick trying to gain her balance. Young initiates a clinch. Maverick gets it down to the mat. As Young's trying to get back up against the fence, Maverick gets the back, then sinks in the choke. And then Miranda Maverick's kind of off to the races. And for Shanna Young, it's kind of been a little bit of a mixed bag. Now, I do have this for Shanna Young, that big camp change over to Syndicate MMA. That really did kind of light a fire back under her. She used to be a fighter out of Knoxville Martial Arts. The Kings, Emily and Jason out of that gym. You have OSP there as well. But for Shanna Young, she's a bit of an odd duck because she has a high school and collegiate background in wrestling. We don't really see that in her fights. But then she also has a karate background, and that very much is the kind of, where the bread gets buttered in most of her game. It's an odd stance that we don't see very often.
That's the weird thing about MMA. Like, you can have all the accolades in one given martial art that you want, but then you don't really translate it all that well to mixed martial arts. It's just really weird how some people can sort of use their base in a much more effective manner. Like, think of a Gilbert Burns, for instance. He comes from a much higher level background, but still, his jiu-jitsu outside the cage, on the streets, if you will, pretty good. His jiu-jitsu in the cage, also very good. But for Young, I always did expect more from her offensively with her takedowns, but just feels like defensively she is such a liability that, like you said, even in a lot of these clinches, she doesn't even look that comfortable in them because she's always going to have to worry about the offensive disadvantage that she's going to have in the wrestling. And for Maverick, I kind of expect her to just go back to the same thing she did in their first fight. And I do feel like she's improved more since their first fight. And I know that might be weird because they have very similar records since then. They're both 1-2 in their last 3. But Miranda Maverick has had close competitive fights against fairly good fighters in the division, whereas Young has just struggled so much with the defense, with her takedowns, that I don't really know how she's ever going to fix that hole in her game. Like, I don't know if Shanna Young's ever going to be able to get past that learning curve of her wrestling defense, because I'll give her striking credit. If she is able to keep it on the feet, she does have pretty good power for the division. She is good offensively with her takedowns, but the issue is Miranda Maverick has shown the ability to defend a lot of takedowns, and she does have decent takedown defense late into fights. So if you're a Shanna Young believer, you might be hanging your hat on, okay, Miranda Maverick might not look great as this fight continues. Maybe she almost looks too good in the first 2 rounds, but I just don't know what Shanna Young is going to do to have a long, sustainable game plan in this matchup.
Like, Shanna Young in her last fight against Gina Mazzani, round number 1, Mazzani was a woman possessed. She landed one of those knees in the clinch that dropped Shanna Young, like when Uriah Hall fought Paulo Costa, because Young just dropped her knees to the mat and then popped right back up really quick. And then Mazzani was out of juice. The Energizer Bunny ran dry. And then the second round, Shanna Young was really able to take over. So credit where it is due, because defending a takedown, forcing the action on the mat, finishing it in a spot where Mazzani's usually able to flow. You remember the fight against Rachel Ostovich that Gina Mazzani had. Wow. Really going back into the memory bank there. For Miranda Maverick, though, again, I mean, we have seen some big fights here. She does a good job with her double legs in open space, running the pipe, continuing to pressure forward with those takedowns, and some big beatdowns in certain fights. And for Maverick in the UFC. The loss to Maycee Barber by split decision. Most people thought Maverick won, but it's still a loss on the page. The loss to Erin Blanchfield, which was kind of a cobbled together short notice affair where Blanchfield was the favorite and was really able to win all over the place. The fight against Sabina Mazo, a little bit of strike for strike, but it really was a big time beatdown. Round 1, round 2. Poor Sabina Mazo. Alright, so for Fear, the Miranda Maverick opened at a minus 300. The line jumped up and it hasn't gone back. She's a minus 555 favorite. Shanna Young's an error code at plus 404. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprise to us as they are to you.
Is it though?
I'm going to say over under 90% Maverick.
I think it's going to be over.
It's way over. 556 total votes, 96% Maverick, 42% by decision, 46% by submission. For the 4% that have Young, 62% by decision. Miranda Maverick's beaten Shanna Young before. She kind of dropped off the push, but she gets the takedowns. Like, I look at this matchup. I think Maverick's going to have success in the same areas that she had success in the Invicta Phoenix Series Rising tournament that she did. And I think that Maverick's going to be able to get the win in this matchup. Now, Young, again, she did look pretty good. Kind of, second round taking over against Mazzani, adrenaline dump, cardio dump. But yeah, I do like Maverick here.
I think Shanna Young is a fighter who does have lasting ability in some of her fights if she is able to fight it under the range that she wants to. But the problem is we've seen Young struggle with her wrestling defense so much in the past that I do think a fighter like Miranda Maverick, who uses her offensive wrestling as a core component of her game plan, to have a lot of success against Young. So I do think Maverick is going to at least somewhat get back on track to the hype that she had once originally had. But that's the weird thing for Maverick. She's always going to be that fighter that she almost once was. So for Maverick, hopefully she is able to get back on track at some point. But again, she had such a high expectations for her coming into the UFC. I always go back to when John Anik had said, hey, she might be the second best women's flyweight in the world right now. And I understand it. She had a very impressive debut, but still, for a fighter to have that kind of a label put on them when the best fighter in the division, someone like Valentina Shevchenko, it's a lot to live up to. So hopefully for Maverick, she can look really good in this performance, and I do expect her to.
Matt calling a 25-year-old a once was. Ooh.
Well, no, but she had so much hype. Think about a fighter like Maycee Barber. Remember how people used to talk about Maycee Barber? It's like talking about Anthony Davis in 2019. People talked about him like he was one of the best players in the world.
And you're talking about her like she's Anthony Bennett.
No, but my point is, like, you're a casual NBA fan, I would say. Like, you have a favorite team, but you're not somebody who stays up every night and watches a lot of games.
Better things to do.
When was the last time you heard about Anthony Davis? Like, Anthony Davis, you probably haven't heard about him in years since they won the title.
Nice, hot to start the year.
For Miranda Maverick, I just think for her, it always really is important for her not only to get wins, but I feel like for her, it's an extra additive to look really impressive in a performance. I feel like this is an opponent for her to be able to do that.
Coming up this weekend, both of us going with Fear the Miranda Maverick to get the win. Let us know down below if you have Syndicate's own Shanna Young to get it done. We have some big time fights left on this card. Daniel Rodriguez taking on Neil Magny in the main event. Oh boy, Marina Rodriguez taking on Amanda Lemos. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.